Hello everyone and welcome to Gierok Farms. Today we are going to do a Q&A video. Starting off here, I want to introduce myself. I am Aaron Gierok, and this is my father, George Gierok. We're the two you're probably going to see most often here on Gierok Farms. We also have some other family members and some friends involved as well. Start off here, we get a lot of questions from you guys throughout the videos in the comments, which we really appreciate, but we don't have all the time in the world to answer every single one online. So we're putting together a Q&A so we can cover some of those repeat questions, along with a couple posts we put out asking for your questions.
We do try to answer a lot of the questions in videos after the fact. So if you're watching consistently, I mean, eventually you will get the idea of what you're asking.
Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in. Let's get into the video here. One of the really common ones is, how many tractors do you guys have on the farm here?
We have 7 right now with your Magnum.
Yep.
So I got a Farmal M, a Super MTA, a 1650 gas Oliver, a 686 diesel International, and a 7405 John Deere, that's the open station one, and then a 7510, which is this one, and then a 7810, which is on the feed mixer back here, and don't forget the 1066. Your Magnum is the
a 7120 Magnum, which is the most recent tractor purchase here on the farm.
And I mean, these are tractors I and my wife have purchased over the last 33 years, so to speak. So even though it seems like a lot of tractors, I mean, those older ones, in a sense, some of them are getting pooped out or way too small for some of the machines that are getting used today. We're still using them, just not on everything.
Yeah, you've never sold a tractor, right?
No, they hold value, and they all got their story, where they came from, and you kind of almost marry to things when you're caring for them, in a sense, that it gets to the point where you can pass them down. We know what them are all about now that we had them so long. If you take care of them, and some of them been rebuilt in different ways, and then
yeah, and it keeps the hours off of one because we're spreading it out over multiple.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to selling tractors, I've gotten a recent comment about where that 1550 Oliver is. If you guys have been watching the channel for a long time, you know that was one of the first tractors on the channel. That was my personal tractor for just plowing snow at my house, and I sold that the winter after I used it. I just didn't need it. I moved to a different house where I didn't need to plow snow with a, I didn't need a big piece of equipment like that. I didn't have that big driveway anymore. So I got rid of that. So you won't see that anymore. It actually got sold to an older farmer, maybe an hour from here. So it's probably still out there getting, putting some work in
it too.
Someone asked, what would be a good starter tractor today for starting a farm? If you had to pick one tractor, what would be your pick for just to have one tractor and farm the way you do, a small dairy like this?
Me, and I think Mother would agree, our 7405 open station, a bit more economical for four-wheel drive, even if it doesn't have a cab. I think the bigger question is, what kind of farming are you going to be doing? And how much farming are you going to be doing? I mean, even this model is considered to be a mid to small size tractor for today's times, but in ours it's virtually the third from the biggest. That would be one, but then it comes down to economics again. But you bought your Magnum, being that's a little older, you got a pretty decent deal on it, as far as I'm concerned. You got a lot more tractor than if you bought a green one.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Coming from a beginning farmer like myself, when it comes to the first tractor that I would buy, I think you can't go wrong with anything from the late 80s or the early 90s. Yeah. They're priced right, and you can
fix them.
Yeah, they're not quite wore out yet. There's plenty of people that know how to work on them, like Dad said.
Well, you're able to.
Yeah, and you all know my pick. It would be an older boxcar Magnum. I would have loved to have bought the equivalent, a John Deere, probably 100 series would have been the same, like a 7800. But for the price and for how common they are, I don't think you can go wrong with that tractor if you're worried about that. And that size tractor, I think today, if you're not farming 1,000+ acres, if it's just a couple hundred, I think 150 horse is more than enough.
And if I was in that position 30 years ago and we came across a tractor like that, we would have probably did the same thing. It's kind of like what you come across. Sometimes you got to take what's available. And
yeah, tractors aren't like cars. They're not just around every other corner. Not everybody's selling them.
And good ones, and ones that got a lot of life left.
So for some more equipment talk, this one came from Bill in the YouTube comments. He asked if we have a specific bucket for feed.
I got my first skid steer in 95, I think is when we bought that first one. We only had one bucket, and then we didn't have so much silage feed. I think we were loading, maybe yeah, we did over winter. But so what I was doing is I was scraping the manure bucket out real thoroughly between, and then, you know, as the years go on, eventually it's always recommended to keep your feed and your manure as separate as you can. That's definitely a thing. You never want to put your feed bucket in the manure or vice versa. So right now we got 3 different buckets that we're still using. I mean, they wear out, but we got one that we use more for dirt. It's a little lower profile. It's a heavier bucket that way. And then we got one for manure, one for feed, and a lot of attachments. 2 grapples. We got what they call a farm grapple. It's a little bit lighter, more for corn stalks and stuff. It's not so heavy on the front of the machine, so you can really get around with it. And then we got the root grapple. That's more for like brush. Maybe if we had to rip out some concrete or something.
Yeah, that's that veering. That's a pretty...
Yeah, it's a heavy, and I noticed there's a lot of weight on the machine too, so you already got a half a load when you start. But again, you know, there's other attachments too. Now we're starting to accumulate some of that to drill the post holes and things like that.
Yeah. Another question is somebody asked, I think they were watching some of our silage videos, and I don't think they've seen every one, because they're asking, why are we not using the loader tractor to push silage on the pile and pack instead of using that Oliver with a blade and then using 1066 to pack?
First of all, where we got our piles, and everything around here is so sloped, so it isn't to the side of a hill. As far as right now, we're driving across the trenches with the boxes unloading, as you've probably seen in the videos. And the blade, for haylage, we don't use. It just doesn't work. It just balls up, and it's not necessary. But it's just all we're doing with the blade is grooming a little bit. It's kind of more of just getting a little finishing touches in between every 5th, 6th load. It's not really, once we get up there higher, it may fill in a low spot or something.
And we're not really pushing stuff around on the pile.
No. So a lot of guys will dump it, and they got plenty of room and a big level area, then they shove it up in there, which is another process we don't have to do, being that we got those self-unloaded boxes that are built to unload into a blower. And we could get into some other type of stuff, but then again, how many different types of configurations of boxes you're gonna get, you know? It just gets to be a lot more about economics at the end.
Another thing, that 7405, which is the loader tractor they're referring to, that depending on how far away we are, normally that's a pretty crucial piece to haul loads back and forth. We can't dedicate that nice 4-wheel drive to the pile. Now with the Magnum,
we may have options.
We'll have an extra tractor.
We've used it. I mean, we have used it some. I think you had it on in the yard here, but it gets to a point too, so it gets very top heavy. That's the thing with that loader. That's the one thing I've always noticed. I've heard of a lot of cases where they roll them things over. We use it where we can. So the skid steer is so much handier to get around for all the not so heavy work. You know, so right now on the front of the 7405, I think there's 8 weights. You take the weights off to get the loader on, but then when you got to go back up on the hill without the weights on, you're kind of switching things back and forth. So.
And it's harder on a front end too to have that loader hanging out the front. So.
I mean, it like I said, we got a really tight yard here in places and stuff, and it sometimes almost gets more clumsy than what we're getting out of it. We'll use it where we can. So.
Yeah, it's definitely a handy tool. So. Another good question. And I think you've kind of answered this before. What was your first tractor?
Growing up on my dad's place, which isn't his farm, it's about 3 miles up. It was actually the first tractor my dad bought when he took over the farm from Grandpa. It's a Super MTA. I mean, that would be the old faithful. I don't care how cold it's been. I don't care how long it's been standing in the back shed. It will start. It's always went. That tractor's never been down for any or had any major issues or anything. So that one in the 1066 when we came here. And then maybe a year later, so that was back in 91, maybe early 93, we bought the 1650 Oliver. Her dad actually, we were at an auction together, and it wasn't bringing a lot of money. I think 3,200. I bid it up to 2,900, and then there was, I think, my equipment jockey ended up getting it. And then minutes later, he comes over to me and asks me for another 200. He'd sell it to me. So he made himself $200, which my father-in-law thought was a good idea because I could have kept bidding. Even back then, it needed tires, needed a few things, but it was a decent deal.
I definitely enjoy using that tractor around the yard. It's very handy. So it was a good buy. And then while she's here, a lot of people have been asking about the new puppy and if we've given her a name yet. And her name is Hazel. So everybody meet Hazel if you didn't already.
And she's got teeth like razor blades.
Yeah,
she's busy using them on everything.
Yeah, she's chewing on stuff, that's for sure. But Owen and Mason have been working on teaching her tricks. You know, the sit, shake, lay down, stuff like that. But we're still working on it. We're still training her in. And then on a down note, speaking of the dogs, people have been asking about Mariska and where she is.
Mariska has kidney disease. She's an older dog, and she has end-stage renal disease or kidney disease, so she's really slowing down a lot. But having Hazel around here has kind of perked her up somewhat. She's eating and drinking better and more active with the puppy and the companionship right now. So
yeah, I think she's pepped up a lot. That's been pretty noticeable.
I mean, we had her to a vet, and just because we weren't sure if it was Lyme disease or what, but her appetite went down to nothing. So typically those older breeds or bigger dogs, bigger breeds don't live a long time.
Yeah, I think they say 8 to 10 years for St. Bernard.
And she's getting close to that anyhow, but yeah, this puppy's got her kind of on her toes now.
I think so. I think it was a good thing to find Hazel because it brought some pep back in her step.
And I think Mariska sets her in her place when she's
trying to teach her the ropes around here a little bit. So they're doing good right now in that aspect, I guess. So
anyways, let's move on to the cattle portion of the farm. We have some questions there. We'll go up to the dairy barn right away. All right, we're standing in the major here in the dairy barn. We get a lot of questions about the barn here. So what size is this barn? What would you call this barn?
So this is a 36 by 80 hip roof barn. It's a tie stall barn, which means it's basically what you see here. So she's got plenty of room to move around, and then they each, for every other cow, they got their own cup. So then it holds 40 using, and again, this is actually our feed alley that goes through. So this cow, I have a small chain on the post over there, and I am able to tie her off. We can go through with our wheelbarrows. So typically we do most of our feeding when the cows are outside for recess anyway, but if we ever have to get across here, it's usually if you use the same cow. Then there was questions about whether they all have their own stall or not. Kind of the early years, we didn't quite have as many of those switch cows. We only pretty much milked only what fit in the barn. They did all have their own stalls, but now it just seems like it's harder to keep that right. So when you dry a cow up, then you put another cow in her spot, and it's amazing how you can train them, but it gets to be a little more of a challenge. Get on there. So right now, there's a few stalls like on the far end that are a little bit smaller, being the way this barn is set up between the main posts that hold everything up. So we try to put the smaller cows in there, like newer heifers that are a little bit smaller, so they just got more room to lay down and things like that.
Farm Boy 884 asked in the comments what our favorite cow is, past or present. And maybe he means breed, or maybe he means a certain cow. So if you had to pick a certain cow and then a certain breed, what would you pick?
My wife's got her heart set on brown Swiss, but her heritage is Swiss, and her dad and that, and they can be an interesting animal. I really like the way the shorthorns are. The shorthorn Colossus, the blue roans, and they're not exactly the biggest milking cows, but they're very hardy. They seem to breed back good. They seem to be easygoing, and if you say you don't want her in this stall and you want her in that one, she'll just go to that one. Holsteins, once they get set on a certain routine, they seem to be a little harder to change. So I guess that's where I'm sitting. And you?
Yeah, so I'd have to agree with the blue roan, and we can go show you one right now here. So here's one of the younger blue roans, one of the Holstein shorthorn crosses. Was her mom a blue roan, or was it a Holstein?
So what I've learned, and we started putting a little shorthorn in. This was like 20 years ago already when I got trained for AI, so we started experimenting. So what would happen is if you'd put shorthorn in a Holstein, and you would get a cow that would look a little more like this one. Now she's got some shorthorn in her. Then if you put Holstein back into her, then you get that almost, and I think when they call blue roan, it's kind of a nickname, but the hair is actually mixed. You know, the white hair is mixed in with the black hair, and it gives almost a bluish look. Now, I think actually all three of these, we maybe have about 10 or 12 now but they're not all true blue growns. One thing I'm gonna say is once you get below here, there's black, that means that there's something mixed in besides Holstein. See, now she doesn't show it. Well, she's got one black spot on her front foot, way up over there. That's kind of a typical sign that there's something crossed in there. But that's something I learned through just doing it. So then the next generation will be blue roan, and then we've been even doing where we would put shorthorn in those blue roans, or even in like these, and we may get like it looks more like a shorthorn, like she's, I guess, like a lighter brown color. If you don't look at them real close, you'd wonder if that's Jersey or what that is, but they're shorthorn. And then like here, this is a Jersey cross, so this is...
That's a brown Swiss Jersey cross.
Right, you're right on this one. So this came out of a Swiss, and we put, this actually, when you talk about a cow with a personality, this one, out of everything we've got and everything we had up to now, this cow's got the biggest personality out of the whole herd. And she's very, very smart. So what happens when we let these cows in, if we have all the grain laid out like we do in the summer, she'll jump into a stall and eat her neighbor's grain and then jump out and run into another stall. It's kind of like she tries to get as many...
Yes, she can before.
And she'll see you coming, and she'll quick go to her spot, you know, so she can be quite a pistol.
Yeah, a heck of a personality. And then if you had to pick a certain cow, is there one from the past or currently that you really remember?
Mom will maybe answer this.
I don't know, the first cow we had in our barn here was, we called her Little Belle. And it came out of my dad's herd, because I had 10 cows when I came here, and she was the first of freshen, so she was with us a long time.
She was a little black cow, right?
She was a short black cow. Her stall was right here. And actually, so when we bought this farm, I was still milking cows at home, and my dad with some of my cows, and her cows were at... But this cow had a calf, I think, out in the pasture on the other farm of your dad's, and then instead of bringing her to his place right away, he just brought her here with her bull calf. And so I had to come down, you know, milk this one cow for, it took us maybe about 2 weeks before the state,
it was inspected,
the state inspector considered it good to go for selling milk. So then we moved all our cows in. But that cow had, I think she was 18 years old. She's had a set of twins, maybe 2 sets. I still got the records from all those years, and yeah, 16 calves in there. And the last few lactations, her milk wasn't so good anymore, but we were just kind of hanging on her because we were getting her pregnant, and we just let her be dry more. When we bought our gooseneck trailer in 07, so we started in 91, that was the first cow to go into that trailer. And our mindset after she was that old was to just keep her and she could just live out her life here. But we realized, and this is kind of an important point I'm making, it wasn't going to be pretty when that day came where she wasn't able to like get up or something because she's gotten so old or she broke a leg or something. So we thought it would be best just if she goes while everything is still okay.
Goes out on a good note. Goes out on a high note.
And and she's nourishing the population.
Yeah, and it's crazy to say that you started with that cow, and I remember that cow as a young boy. I remember that.
That was still here when you were a little kid,
Yeah.
I don't know, we've had a handful of those cows that made it well past 10 years, you know, and back in those days, but I think it's kind of like the older cows, it's kind of like people. You're just going to run into more complications, more milk fevers, and then the chance of breaking a leg, the things are just, you know, that's just how it is. If you keep a younger herd, you run into less problems and you're able to, I guess right now the meat price is so high, it's almost a wise thing not to hang on to them too long. And again, like you said, sell them while they're good and they can march on the trailer and not where they're, you're praying that they make it through and pass inspection. It's not right.
And then you had some milking equipment questions.
In one of the chore videos, somebody asked what the milk machine is. It's a Surge One Touch is the brand name of the milk machine, and you can show here. Now these are the valves where the milk would go into the stainless line, and then there's a hose that goes up. This would be your pulsator line. So here's your electrical that does the pulsation, but the milk goes in up too. So inside that line, it's like washed, and then the other one's just the air. So that's generally how it works. So what you're doing, you only plug in one end. Typically on some of these older systems built in the 80s, you would have 2 hoses. You'd plug one into the milk line and then one into your pulsation line. And then that just gets to be a little more fumbling, and we'll show you the other end of it.
When it comes to the two-piece unit that Dad's referring to, I did milk in a barn like that in high school, and yeah, it isn't as simple and nice. It's a bit clumsier.
So we're in our milk house now, and this is the same valves as out there. This is what they call them, wash manifold. But basically, then this is all hooked to the claw. And I believe we got surge claws too. We used to have universal. You can mix and match some of these parts, but you got a pulse line and double pulsations. You got two. And if you look back at some of the videos, I think we did some videos on how this all works.
Some more specifics. Another common question, which I don't think we've ever touched on: how much milk does the bulk tank hold, and how often do they pick it up?
700 gallons. They pick it up every other day, and I think there's some regulations and rules to that. There might be a few exceptions with some of the smaller farms that were quite a ways from the creameries where they might let them go 3 days. I think you got to keep your bacteria, everything's got to be in check. It's kind of a fine line there. Someone asked about what company we sell to. This is our company right here, AMPI, which is Associated Milk Producers Incorporated. So my dad started with them way back, and I think 69 is when that company started. And something happened in our small town where our creamery quit there, and then that's where my dad started selling to where I grew up. And then when I came here, it was kind of, well, where do you start? Just basically had the same milk truck, picked up my dad 3 miles up, and then came here and picked up our milk. And then we've been with that company ever since.
Yeah, and that's a cooperative, so that's owned by the farmers.
We are technically owners, and the way that works is we as farmers put together a board, and we hire people to run the cheese. And most of the MPI is cheese. And we have a butter plant, we have a packaging plant in Portage. I'm not sure now how many different plants are still open. It's been changing quite a bit lately, and farm numbers have been dropping, but farms been getting larger there. And then somebody did ask, like our products, you don't see this logo out there. So we make 640-pound blocks of cheese. They go to Portage. Portage will slice and dice them for whatever company like Sargental. And then what's the other one?
Crystal Farms.
Crystal Farms.
But if you're looking for our label, we do now have Dinner Bell is like our logo.
But I don't know how to explain that.
It's more for the producers. I don't think that's available for purchase in a store.
Yeah, it is. Dinner Bell.
Have you seen it?
Yeah. So if you want to buy AMPI specific sold product, Dinner Bell is. Yeah.
Dinner Bell is kind of our new logo that we put together.
'Cause the thought was that AMPI, it isn't as appealing, that logo in a store for the consumer that doesn't know what it is, versus that Dinner Bell logo. So if you see Dinner Bell in the store on butter or cheese, it is AMPI. AMPI has gotten a lot of cheese awards, national and global. And it is, we've had our share of different stuff through the years, and it is a good product. What our company is doing, so we make the 640-pound blocks, and then companies like Crystal Farms or Sargental or whatever will request it to get packaged a certain way, and they want to sell it under their name. Kind of doesn't seem right, but yet it's like if we produce the raw material and you do what you want with it to make it worth more. So like for instance, Burger King, last I heard, we're producing the cheese slices that you put on the burger for Burger King.
And the shreds that go on pizzas for Domino's.
Yeah.
They have a lot of contracts.
And for Culver's, the little butter cups, that's our butter there.
It's kind of dispersed around quite a bit. It's known to be one of the bigger cheese companies, especially up here.
Yeah, they're not only selling nationally but also globally.
So what are we, number 7 or 8? I think Horde's Dairyman came out with something. I'd have to look back again because it probably changes a little bit, as far as volume of product that comes out. But anyway, someone asked if the cold weather affects milk production. Actually, cows would prefer it to be, ideal would be like 50 degrees. And of course, dry, where they're not out in the snow and that. The one thing that will affect milk production is an extremely hot, humid day. And that's almost something you cannot adjust for. You're not going to have air conditioning in your barn. I do know of a barn that did put it in, and that was more of an experimental thing. It gets so expensive, and then the environment with the dust and different things that go along with it, it probably, from what I understand, it was a hard thing to maintain. because they need fresh ventilation. But anyway, no, actually in the colder weather, being that, especially in a barn like this, and the freestall barns are a little bit colder, but they're still closed up to keep them out of the wind and that. And the big thing is appetites really go up in colder weather. More that cow eats, and if she has the genetics to produce, production will stay pretty good.
Yep, and water is another big thing. That's why humidity hurts. So if you create an environment where a cow is drinking a lot of water but not sweating and overheating, she's going to produce more milk.
But again, then on the other note is warm weather makes grass. Like I said, ideal temperature is 50s, 60s, and then you're not going to get much grass until it gets 70 to 80 at times. So you got to kind of take the best of both worlds there.
Yeah, so it does affect it. All right, another common question we get, and Mom kind of touched on this in a video once, but we use a lot of terms here that not every person understands. We use milking cow or just cow. We use heifer, dry cow,
Springer,
switch cow. Let's quickly touch on some of those terms on what they all mean.
The definition to me of a cow is if she's had at least one calf, and it's kind of like you being a mother. You know, if you had one offspring, you're a mom for the rest of your life. Up until that point, you're considered a heifer. And
so the females, the girls, are heifers until they have their first baby. Then when they have a calf, then they're a cow.
And what we would do is still call them the heifer because they're kind of new into the barn yet. We'd say that, and then they would call them springing heifers, which typically back in the day, they would breed the animals so that they would all come in the spring. And you're talking back in the 30s, maybe when trucking and stuff didn't go very well over winter and all that. So, and then you took advantage of the grass.
The springy heifer, I would consider as someone close to calving when their udder is filling up and they're getting ready to have their calf.
Within probably 2 to 3 weeks, when you start seeing signs of actually her showing, we call it.
And then speaking of pregnancy, another term would be fresh cow or fresh heifer. Fresh would be they just came into the barn, they just started producing milk, they're new to the dairy herd, they're lactating now.
They just had their calf within, I suppose, 2 to 3 weeks. You'd consider that a fresh cow. It maybe takes about a week for that production to ramp up to its peak or so. You know, they vary a little bit.
George refers to some of the cows as switch cows. The switch cows are milking cows also, but currently we have too many cows than what fit in the barns, so that's what we refer to as our switch cows because they go in and out of the barn for milking. They're fed out here in this bunk. They receive the same food as the cattle in the barn do. It's the same feed. Silages, haylage, corn, silage, and hay. They also have mineral supplements available to them. They have fresh water available to them.
If anything, it's a little better. It's more like a freestall setting where they got free range out here.
Depends on the day a little bit, and there is an overhang in here on the end of our barn where a few of them can get under the roof if the weather got bad.
It's a bedding pack, so maybe cows that are a little bigger don't have. It gives them more freedom at times,
well, we get cows, like I'll see there's a couple of them that would they'd stand back in the gutter or something. They're just big. They're just, it's better. So if we're going to have a switch cow, we'll say, okay, she's going to be outside when she's not getting milked. And then, of course, like the blue roans, they're built a little more like beef cows, which they'd rather be outside. They
like to be outside at night.
They will do better. So what I'll do is, it's always the same ones. It's not always different cows, especially in the winter. In the summer, don't make no difference. Everybody goes in, but, and then I'll know, okay, let's say I got 6 or 7 extra cows. I basically, once it gets down to only 6 left outside, just shut the gate. And then when we milk the rest of, the whole herd, we let out 7 or 8 or whatever the number is, and those will run in. And then what we do is we give them their dry grain, which is kind of like the candy. It's kind of like, it's a really good treat. And they know they're going to get that, so that gives them incentive to run in and line up nice for us, and it's almost more of a lure. Yeah. Not really chasing them then.
They come in themselves, yeah.
But then moving on to dry cows and heifers next to our bedding pack of switch cows here. This back half of this building here is dry cows and heifers that are bred.
See, now this would be considered a springing heifer. He's starting to show an udder. Now maybe like a week ago or so, there would have been what I call a tiny pouch there. Her udder is almost halfway there, where she's maybe 2 weeks away from having her first calf. So that would be considered to be a springer.
So here would be an example of a dry cow. Once their milk production dips off, which is normally, you'd say 2 months.
We got to give them 60 days. So a clear sign of a dry cow is her udder almost looks like an empty gunny sack. So they're just kind of, they're eating and resting and growing their calf inside them. So the last 2 months, but some of them I'll give them longer time. If we need room in the barn or they're not milking that good anymore, or we got a lot of pasture, we'll just put them out in the dry cow pasture with those and just give them more dry time. I guess I always feel it's better to give them more time than not enough, as far as giving them that rest. So they get that rest. So when they have that calf, that flush of milk will come in. Otherwise, if you didn't dry them up and you kept continually milking them, you wouldn't get your real big punch out of production. You'd lose that.
Yeah. And it's healthier for the animal. It's more efficient for the farm. So
it's better for a calf. It's better for her. It's just, in history has shown that's the best way it works.
So this barn we're in here, we commonly refer to it as the bull barn, but there's only one bull in it. Truly a dry cow and heifer barn.
Summer we will put some hay in here in the center section of this building because most of our dry cows and heifers are all out in the pasture then. And then by winter that's fed out, and everything that's in here is either old enough to be bred for the first time or dry cows. So heifers all the way up to dry cows, but mostly adult animals.
Yeah. So we touched on all the females when it comes to bovines. So our one male here on the farm, our red and white Holstein bull back there, especially when he's standing up, it's really noticeable that he's a male and he's intact. He's probably double the size of some of these heifers.
They'll usually, if they're a bull, their head, you can just tell they'll grow bigger. Usually like a steer, they're cut out when they're babies. They'll almost be more shaped like a heifer when they're younger.
And we do have one steer on the farm, right? Or two?
Yeah, I think one we got
in the young stock barn.
No, she's actually right here.
There you go.
Yeah, and it's actually a blue roan. And I don't remember why we kept him. I mean, it'd be something we could butcher, but he wouldn't taste any different than, for instance, a heifer that wouldn't be able to have a calf for whatever reason. Very rarely, but you might have 1 out of 30 that may not be able to become pregnant.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they would just go for meat.
Being he's no longer considered a bull, but a male, he's a steer. Instead of putting all that energy and growth towards, testosterone and breeding, they just put it towards gain.
So, for instance, if you had a whole pen of bulls, and I haven't personally raised bulls, a lot of these places where we buy breeding bulls, we'd always have to buy them from a different farm, so they're not related. They'll fight. Like I said, that hormone and stuff, and it's not safe. Like, if this was a whole pen of bulls to go in there and do some work in there, you got to be extremely cautious about all that. When it comes to heifers or steers, they're almost like that puppy in a sense. They're just so pesty. It's kind of like they'll chew the clothing right off you, and it's a whole different thing. The bull, he'll be looking at you, and that's his territory.
Sizing you up. Yeah.
Yep, and then that's natural. He's doing what bulls do, and you just got to be careful. I guess the way we maneuver around a bull is not to bring that out of him. Basically, leave him alone, move him with other cattle.
All right, I want to stop halfway through here because it's getting kind of long. We're going to cut it into 2 parts. So this is the end of part 1. Thank you all for making it to the end of the video. We really appreciate it. We enjoy all the comments. It's nice to take some time here and dedicate a video just to answering your questions. We try to answer them throughout the videos, but it was nice to take some time just to answer those questions. We appreciate all those comments. We appreciate that you're part of the journey. We will see you next time for part 2, so stay tuned for that, where you can get the rest of your questions answered. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you then.